Welcome to another edition of the Headless Hammerhead Guide to Comic Books. Today we'll be discussing Part 3 of the Comic Book Lingo Dictionary. So stay tuned and hold on tight. Commissions. Commissions are works for hire from an artist, and they're usually a quick sketch, although they could be a full work of art. Sometimes these are done on a cardstock, on canvas, on just regular paper, or they can be done on a blank sketch variant of a comic book. A lot of comic book issues come with a special blank sketch variant, which is basically the trade dress of the comic book with the rest of it blank for the artist to make their sketch. These commissions are usually done for a flat fee. A lot of times you can get these done at conventions, or a lot of artists have through their websites the option to hire them for a commissioned work. These commissions, if they're done in the presence of a CGC witness, then you can have it sent to CGC and it still receive a verified label. Now this would be the yellow label. This is also corresponds to a witness signature. So if an artist signs a book on the cover or even on the inside, generally you want to have that witnessed by a representative of the grading company where you're going to send the book to be graded. And if it is witnessed, then you're going to receive a yellow label. No matter which one of the grading services you hire to grade your book, most of them will use a yellow label to indicate that it was a witnessed signature. Now, if it doesn't have a signature or it's just a regular book, you're going to have a blue label. A blue label indicates a regular, complete comic book. This is the most desired label, and it's also the most common because most books are regular and complete. Now, if the book is not complete, if it's missing some pages or something that's integral to the book, or if it's signed by an artist or author or any other creator that has not been witnessed, it will receive a green label. This is called the qualified label, and it is dreaded in the collecting community because it indicates that it's just something that's not verified, and it just doesn't pull as much money when you try to sell it. It's not as valuable. Now, there are certain comics that are well known to be returned with a qualified label, and we'll discuss one of them later in this video. But as you can see here, this one received the qualified label because it's missing a value stamp, which was an insert. Now, if the pages had been replaced with a reprint of the page, then it would receive a purple label, which is the restored label. This will be assigned to a book that has either had some paint done to correct fading or scrubbing or something. It also could be indicating that staples that have been removed and replaced. Either rusty staples were taken out and replaced with new ones, or some of the pages inside were replaced, or even some other integral part like tattoos were replaced when they were not originally part of this particular book. You'll hear a lot of collectors talk about the Census. The Census is something that CGC had for the longest time. It is now also available for CBCS, and some of the other grading companies are starting to take part in their own censuses. And the main purpose of the Census is to help people who are trying to sell their comic books, because it indicates how many copies of that comic book in a particular grade are out there. So, for example, if you do a search for Spawn number 1 and it indicates all of the variants for Spawn number 1, currently there's facsimiles and there's also the newsstand versus the direct edition, etc. And it'll divide it by those variants, and it'll tell you for each one of those how many 9.8s, how many 9.6s, 9.4s, all the way down. And this will help you because when you place your item up for sale, if say it's the only 9.8 out there, you can use that as a selling point and to get more for your item. So some of the common conditions that you'll see that will reduce the grade of your book when you submit it include handling dings like this one, and you can also have spine dings or ticks, as you can see here. Basically these happen if you mishandle the comic. If you're not careful, you hold it with one hand, shake it around, let it bend while you're holding it, things like that. Some, of course, will be more severe than others, but the dings themselves generally can be what's called pressed. I think we discussed this in a previous video, pressing the comic book to get rid of these dings. However, if it is color breaking, as you can see here, where on a colored comic, usually the darker prints, you can see the little white nick there, and that's a color breaking ding that cannot be repaired with pressing. Another common but pressable defect is the bend, and you can see here on the upper corner. This, of course, can happen with mishandling as well. Either you place it in the bag with the board, but you weren't careful when you put it in, and the corner just happened to bend while you were sliding it in. It could be by handling or other ways as well. And another way to mishandle comic is how you store them and pack them. We will show you the proper way to do this to avoid what's called a stacking bend, also known as a spine bend. You can see here, it's a little hard to see in the light sometimes, but you'll see a big bend that runs all the way from the top of the spine all the way down to the bottom of the book, and it's usually because you've stacked a bunch of comics on top of this one, or you've packed it wrong in a short or long box, a little tight and in the wrong position. Boxing is another thing that occurs with improper storage. Usually on older books you see these brown spots that appear on the comic book, and this can reduce the grade of your comic. So can the yellowing of the pages. These are called off-white or creamed pages. This is a result of age and improper storage in a bag and board that is not archival safe, and it can result in damage to the comic. Now on to some names you should know. Todd McFarlane. This is somebody that you definitely should know. You should recognize him himself. You should be able to recognize his art as well. It is very stylized, but very, very popular. He popularized Spider-Man he invented the way the web is drawn on Spider-Man with little twirlies all around. He has done many, many innovations. He created Spawn. Now he runs Image Comics. He is the CEO. And he has McFarlane Collectibles, where they produce statues and toys, a lot of really cool stuff. And not just from Image Comics, they produce things from DC and other publishers and other popular characters as well. Now you'll recognize a lot of McFarlane's art. Once you get familiar with it, you'll be able to spot it right away. He still creates art, although he's very busy as CEO of Image, but a lot of his classic covers have been homaged a bunch of times, and there's some that have made the issue a key just because of his cover art, and not necessarily because there's an event inside of the book, just simply because the art is so classic. And because he is perhaps the most well-known and most successful artist of the modern era, he has a lot of nicknames. He's known as Todd the God McFarlane, the Todd Father, and things like that. So you'll hear references to him, and if you find him at a convention, definitely get his autograph. He's super nice as well. And prior to McFarlane, we have Jack Kirby. He is known as Jack King Kirby, and it is because he is the standard for comic books. He is actually the person responsible for making comic books what they are today. Comics became very popular, especially around the time of the war, because they're action-packed. They usually had a lot of great themes that were from current events, things like that. And he not only worked for Marvel or DC, he did other things as well, but he popularized new angles for the characters. As you can see here, very dynamic artwork that he created, and it really influenced pretty much every modern artist today can list Jack Kirby as an influence. And again, he's not called Jack King Kirby for nothing. He was a legend, and some argue the greatest name in comic book history. Kirby worked very closely with Stan the Man Lee. Stan Lee is a very popular figure. He was the face of comics for pretty much the entire modern era until his death. Even still today, he is very well known. He's made cameo appearances in some of the Marvel movies, etc. But he is known for writing and co-creating or creating a lot of the very popular characters of today, including the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and of course Black Panther. Stan Lee was really well known and well liked, although he's recently become controversial because of giving credit to some of the artists he worked with, but that doesn't take away from his own contributions, because he did do all of these things. He did co-create at least some of these characters, and without him we wouldn't have Spider-Man or the Fantastic Four, things like that. Now, other things you should know within the comic book industry include this comic book right here. No other comic in history has been the source of so much contention, debate, and argument as the first full appearance of Wolverine. That again is where the debate lies, but the point on this comic here is that it's the only comic in the world that can be identified simply by its issue number. You hear the word 181 and you know that they're talking about this particular comic book issue and none other. So you can actually walk up to any experienced comic book collector and without saying Incredible Hulk, you just say, do you have 181? And they will know exactly what you're talking about. Another well-known comic known simply by an abbreviation is Ultimate Fallout 4, the first appearance of Miles Morales, Spider-Man, and this is known as UF4. So if you see it written as UF4, you know this is what they're talking about. It's the first appearance of Miles Morales. Another abbreviation you should know is ASM. That stands for Amazing Spider-Man. A lot of people, because it just before was considered a long comic book title, people would abbreviate it, and it's just stuck. ASM for Amazing Spider-Man, and that is what it is. So a lot of times people would say ASM 121, and you will know, or you should know, what they're talking about. And similar to Ultimate Fallout 4, you have Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man. It's not Spider-Man number 1 or ASM number 1. It is AF15, Amazing Fantasy number 15, first appearance of the Amazing Spider-Man. And finally, we come to a comic book that changed collecting forever. This Amazing Spider-Man 238, ASM 238, is a comic book that again has been the source of a lot of contention and debate, but it has pretty much settled. And the main reason is because of an insert that comes within this issue. It is called the tattoos, TATTOOZ, and these tattoos are basically a piece of cardstock that came inside of the book. And because it is considered part of the book, if you submit this for grading, it comes back without a blue label, it comes back with a green label, and as incomplete, because it's missing the tattoos. So this is one comic issue that is sought after by collectors, even collectors who normally will accept a really badly damaged copy of a book, really poor quality, maybe in good condition or poor condition. They generally will not take this even in a bad condition if it doesn't have the tattoos insert. So this is a very, very important issue in the history of comic books and in collecting specifically. So if you do find this issue, the original, you are definitely going to want to make sure you ask if it has the tattoos inside. If you find a copy on eBay, things like that. And you need to make sure that it is the original insert and not a replica that has been placed inside, because that would make it a restored comic book. We'll discuss the history of this as well as the causes of the debate and the lasting effects of the debate in modern collecting and grading in a future video. Something you'll hear a lot of comic book readers talk about is canon, comic book canon. And what that refers to is the continuity of the story of the comic book itself. This is very common, particularly with the Star Wars series of comic books, mainly because they have so many different titles and so many different movie and TV show adaptations, including cartoons and such. And because of that, a lot of people who are reading the comics want to know if something that happened in one of those TV shows or cartoons or movies, or in one of the other series within the Star Wars universe, affect the main story or the main continuity, and what they refer to this is canon. So you'll hear people say, is that canon? This also happens with other comic books, not just Star Wars, and you'll see it here, for example, with Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel is in the comic books an Inhuman, and she gained her powers in a different way than she did in the TV show. So what you see in the TV show where they're implying that she is a mutant, then that is not canon, what you've seen on this TV show. So it's completely different. And what happens or has happened in the TV show will not affect what happens or what is known in the comic book stories for Miss Marvel. Now, because comic books are long running, not everything that happens in them can be considered permanently canon. Comic books created something very unique to literature, and to even affects books, it affects movies, it affects TV shows, and it's what's called retroactive continuity, or retcon for short. This is something that was unique to comic books because a lot of them run for so many years, and a lot of times the stories will change and evolve. And some TV shows that are long running have adapted this as well. And so even outside of comics now, you can have retroactive continuity or retcon. And what that means is, like for example, with this story, Sabretooth came out and indicated that he is the father of Wolverine. This was later retconned, which means it was later retroactively changed so that it was not true. But for the longest time, he was known to be Wolverine's father until somebody else took over the reins on writing the comic book series and decided, you know what, that's not going to fit my story. Let's change that. Turns out Sabretooth was lying. Or turns out we're doing a paternity test. Oh, it's not true. Something like that. And this will allow a writer to continue with their version of the story without worrying about conflicting with the continuity. So again, retroactive continuity. And now you can have something where you tell a story where Wolverine and Sabretooth were actually childhood friends and they grew up together in the same town, they just don't remember it. Or you can go back and say, oh, everything, it was all just a dream about him being the father, etc. Now, once you start making some friends within the comic book community, you may receive something that's known as an AOK. An AOK is an act of kindness, and it is basically a gift that another person from within the comic book community will send to you for no cost and no reason, and just out of the blue. They'll send you a box, usually with something valuable inside, or it could just be comics that you like to collect, even if they're not valuable, something you may be missing from your collection and have always wanted, or sometimes it is something valuable and it is received and nothing is expected in return. It is really nice to let others in the community know that you received an AOK from somebody, just so that they know and can give that person props, but of course that's not required. Another abbreviation you'll see very commonly is NSFW. That's not safe for work or not suitable for work. The indication is that this is either too bloody or violent, or it is inappropriate in a sexual way. It's got some sexually inappropriate or sexually explicit content that you shouldn't be looking at work or school. Allocations occur with comics that are limited print runs. So basically, for example, this one, Sarah Lone, number 2, cover E, was limited to 1,000 copies of this comic. No matter how many were pre-ordered during FOC, the publisher was only going to print 1,000 copies of this comic book. So anybody who pre-ordered it, even prior to FOC, where normally they'd be guaranteed a copy of a comic because that determined print run. Print run was determined for this comic beforehand, and therefore, even if they received 2,000 orders, only 1,000 were going to be filled. The other 1,000 would be left without their copies. So that would be called an allocation of the 1,000 that were available. On to some things you should know in the comic book community. One is Key Collector Comics. This has very quickly, especially during the pandemic, grown in popularity. It used to be that Overstreet was the standard pricing guide for comic book collecting, but Key Collector Comics overtook it, and Key Collector Comics remains up to date digitally. There is an app that you can review current comics. It's got other features such as dollar bin diving, where you can find some keys within the dollar bin by doing a search there. They do key comics for the week, for every week when comics come out, things like that, and then they have their own picks. Now, there have been some controversies with Key Collector regarding whether or not they manipulate the market or not. That's not something we're going to debate here. We'll probably discuss it in a future video, but just know it is something you should be aware of. Now I'm going to mention some of the top community members you should be aware of, at least. You don't have to become friends with all these people or follow them or even watch all their videos, but you need to be aware who they are and that they exist, because everybody in the community knows these people or knows of them. One is Comic Tom 101. Comic Tom is very popular. He's actually the most popular YouTuber in the comic book community. He has the most followers of anybody else. Nobody even comes close. And of course, because of that, he's got a lot of influence within the community. He does have exclusive comics that he comes out with his name. He does have relationships with, for example, the creator of Key Collector Comics. He has relationships with Whatnot. He has relationships with a lot of artists and creators. So he is somebody that you should be aware of. And if you hear mention of his name, then you should be aware of who he is. He's a top influencer within the comic book community. The YouTuber with the second most followers within the comic book community is by far Bueller, and he runs Comics with Bueller YouTube channel. Again, you should be fully aware of who he is when somebody mentions his name. He likes to do a review of all comics that are out on FOC, and also which comics are coming out each week on the shelves. He does some reviews on the quality of the comics that he does read, and he has some exclusive variants as well, just like Comic Tom 101. Now, Bueller has taken to the streets in recent years. He purchased a van, sold his house, and he's living out of this van, which has some advertisements, some paid endorsements slapped on the sides of it. He drives around from one convention to another and from different comic shops to others, and he broadcasts live from those locations. So he is somebody who is very involved in the community. He likes to meet people, so that's why he's doing this, and he wants to meet people all across the country in different shops and different markets. So if you do run into him, Actually, I was shopping one day at my local comic shop at my LCS, and he happened to be in there, and I just said hello and took a picture. So if you see him, say hi. Another influencer who happens to be the rebel of the comic book community is Economics and Comics. Billy runs that channel, and basically Economics and Comics also has an online store, economicsandcomics.com, and runs his YouTube channel as well. He discusses every single issue that is on FOC for that week. He also discusses the top comics coming out on the shelves on any given week, and he does other content as well on his shows that's very entertaining. He also has very close relationships with a lot of the comic book artists, and because of that, he's actually created a lot of exclusive variants for different comic book publishers, but also created his own comic magazine, which is called Speechless Artist Insider, in which he picks a artist from the comic book industry to create a cover exclusively for this issue, and the inside he interviews the artist, and they provide pictures of their entire process. They discuss the tools that they use and their whole process of creating this image as well. So it is a very great resource if you're interested in comic book art and learning about the comic book industry in general. Also, it's a great comic book to have in your collection because they are all very limited runs. So Billy from Economics and Comics, you'll know him by his trademark orange monster hat that he's always wearing, and he loves using funny phrases like sickness and butter, but he's also a very nice guy. If you get to meet him, say hello as well. Now, we've discussed the secondary market, but a very important one to know is Whatnot. This is fairly new. It started around the time of the pandemic and has grown very, very quickly to the point where they even publish their own comics. They are a publisher now, Whatnot Publishing. And the company is recently become very controversial because of some of the ways that they run the business itself. It is an auction site similar to eBay, but it's a live auction site. And because of that, they do have live auctions at some of the influencers that they contract run auctions live from conventions, and there's a lot of exclusive convention variants for comic books that become very valuable and desirable. So running, a lot of them have been known to buy up entire inventory of these exclusive variants, and a lot of people are upset that these get bought up by one person, one influencer, and then sold for a huge premium on Whatnot, and other people who would otherwise have been able to get it at the regular price were unable to do so because these influencers were given priority. But just be aware that this goes on, and also that it is a great resource to purchase comics and sell comics if you're interested on the secondary market. Drip is another competitor of Whatnot, and they're up and coming. They are also a great resource for the secondary market. So if you want to split your or open up your options on where you're selling your comics and collectibles, eBay, Whatnot, Drip, Mercari, these are all great places to go. And when you do sell your comics, you may have a lot of buyers asking if you ship in a Gemini mailer. A Gemini mailer is this pictured here. It's a cardboard box made specifically for comic books. It fits the comic perfectly. It protects it from damage. You know how the US Post Office can mishandle mail and packages. A lot of times there's been nightmare stories. But with a Gemini mailer, they're very well protected, especially if you pack them with either a top loader or some other type of protection like a thick, clear backing board. But these come in different thicknesses to hold either a trade paperback or a single issue. There's also boxes that they've come out with recently that hold up to 25 comics, and they have several different sizes, different styles of packaging, and you can go on and sometimes get a discount from certain of the influencers that you see on their YouTube channels, etc., or even on their Instagram and stuff. You can get a discount code to purchase in bulk from Gemini directly. And once you finally have your collection, there's going to be a need to keep track of all the issues that you have and in what conditions, where you're storing them, etc., especially as your collection grows to several short or long boxes, etc., in several locations around your house or a warehouse or storage unit, whatever. So CLZ is a great resource. It is specifically made for collectibles. They have different ones for movies and other things, including comics. They have a huge database. It'll come up with the picture of the comic issue, the variant that you've put in. There is an option where you can scan the barcode in it. It should come up most of the time. And it does give a lot of details about the book. As you can see here, it says Batman, then Nightfall, and you see a little key. It says Bane breaks Batman's back. This indicates if it's a key, a small or a minor or major key, and what makes it a key. It also gives you other details such as all the creators involved in the comic book, which characters are in there, and other details as well, as if it's a modern comic, if it's Silver Age, Golden Age, etc. And the value. This does link to some online price guides, although you do have to pay for the subscription to the price guide separately. So you're paying for subscription for this one as well as for the price guide to be able to link the two. But it does give you a good idea of the value of your collection overall, as well as of individual issues, and even within a title itself. It does let you sort in many, many different ways, so it's very convenient. And on to some of the biggest stores you should know. Things from Another World, also known as TFAW. This is a very large comic book store. It's based out of Portland, Oregon, and they usually have very good prices. They carry a lot of comics. They're a huge store. They had 3 locations, I believe, and one has closed down, but they're still a huge store. And if you hear somebody talking about TFAW, this is what they're talking about. You should be aware of its existence even if you don't shop there. And the other big shop you should know is Midtown Comics. These is arguably the largest comic book store in the country. They're based out of New York, and they have a couple of locations, but they have so many comic books and a huge database as well. They do regular sales as well, and they do have some exclusives. They do have signed books, slab books, things like that, and they're easy to deal with and order from. So Midtown and Tifa are not the only large comic stores out there. There's also Mile High Comics. They were huge in the 90s, with very well known for their one-page ads. If you get a 90s comic and open it up, you'll likely see an ad from Mile High Comics. It had a lot of writing. They listed a lot of individual issues, and it was very hard to read unless you had reading glasses, and very confusing. And as you can see here, their website follows suit in that same style, but it's what they're known for. And also they have a very charismatic and eccentric owner, and if you ever go there, it's a fun place, and some great people go there, some great people work there, and it's a nice place. However, they are a large store as well. If you want to shop small and you don't have a local comic shop, I would recommend Economics and Comics as one of them. Again, owned by Billy, who runs the Economics and Comics YouTube channel. Very small store. It's a one-man operation, and customer service is top-notch. They also sell their Economics and Comics exclusive variants there as well, and Speechless Artist Insider. That's the only place to get it at cover price. But the best small store is Dangerous Waters Comics and More. By far, it is a very, very small shop. They do not have exclusive variants yet or anything like that, but they do offer FOC orders for all comics that are for sale and pre-order. They do offer every single one, as well as new releases. They do have other things like toys, little magnetic calendars, and trade paperbacks, things like that you don't find in many other small shops. So if you don't have an LCS, shopping at Dangerous Waters Comics and More is a great option. They ship fast, they package extremely well, and they provide top-notch customer service. And that does it for another edition of the Headless Hammerhead Guide to Comic Book Collecting. This has been the third chapter in the Comic Book Lingo Dictionary, Part 3, the final chapter. So thank you for taking the time to watch my video and spend some time with me, and I hope you got something out of it. I hope you've learned something, and something valuable that'll help you in your journey within the comic book community and comic book collecting, or if you're a speculator, at least that it helps you in some way to sell books a little bit better as well. Now, please make sure that you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get reminded of any videos that I put up. I don't put up videos daily. I try to put them up weekly, maybe bi-weekly, but I try to keep them short. Future videos will not be as long as these comic book dictionary videos, but they'll be very, very quick, easy to digest, and they'll delve into some detail on specific topics that would interest you as a new comic book collector, to help educate you and make it easier for you to get into the hobby without feeling overwhelmed or intimidated. Also, please make sure that you join me at my store, Dangerous Waters Comics and More, which is dangerouswaterscomics.com, where you'll find some great deals on new and back issues. You can do pre-orders as well. There's trade paperbacks, toys, and other items like games, etc. So please make sure you check it out, dangerouswaterscomics.com, and send me a note. You can reach out to me through YouTube comments. I do respond to every single comment. I read every single one. And you can also reach out to me, headlesshammerhead@gmail.com, if you want to reach out with something more personal that you don't want everybody to see. I'm more than happy to receive your email and respond to it. I do also want to ask that if you know somebody who's looking to get into the hobby, please let them know about my channel. Hopefully it can help them know a little bit more before they dive in, and can help them become better collectors and more involved in the community, as well as they'll know some of the major players, some of the major stores, and some of the lingo as well. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you join me in the next video where we're going to delve into some really important topics in collecting. So I'll see you then. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get reminded once it does get uploaded. And remember,
we don't bite here.